A view of American life during the 1930s. Do you remember those old stories passed down from grandparents or parents? Tales of a time when life moved slower, felt tougher, but hearts were closer. Today we're traveling back to one of America's most challenging eras, the 1930s, the age of the Great Depression. This wasn't just a chapter in textbooks, it was a daily struggle for millions. What did everyday life really look like? How did families find hope and small joys in such darkness? Join us as we rediscover a decade shaped by grit, resilience, and the deep bonds that held communities together. The context: a difficult time, the 1930s. As we know, the 1930s were defined by a historical event of immense impact, shaking the entire world. That event was the Great Depression. It all began on a dark Tuesday in 1929, the stock market crash on Wall Street. But don't be mistaken, this wasn't just a problem for tycoons or investors. In the blink of an eye, its impact quickly spread throughout the entire economy, seeping into every small corner of society, becoming the worst and longest economic downturn in the entire history of modern industry. The destructive power of the Great Depression was truly horrific, far beyond any prediction. The most frightening and perhaps most haunting number was the unemployment rate. It skyrocketed to an unbelievable level, reaching 25% of the population. Stop for a moment and try to imagine what this number means in real life. This means that an estimated 13 to 15 million Americans were completely jobless. Think about it, out of every 4 adults you met on the street, 1 person couldn't find any work to support themselves and their families. 4 people. Such a huge, heartbreaking number. It's hard to imagine. Fathers, husbands, the pillars of families, who perhaps previously held important positions in companies. What were they doing now to earn food for their wives and children? How great was the despair when they had to search for food in garbage cans? It wasn't just about lacking money. It was about losing self-respect, losing their role in the family. Finding a new job seemed to become an impossible task. It's said that a small job posting for just 6 open positions could attract the interest and applications of over 15,000 people. Think about that fierce competition. The hope of finding a job was incredibly fragile, like searching for a needle in a haystack. Unable to find work at home, what did many men in extreme despair have to do? They became hobos. They illegally hopped freight trains, accepting a dangerous, nomadic, homeless life, moving from town to town. Their only purpose was to hope to find even a small opportunity, a temporary job in a distant place. Life on those trains was incredibly harsh, full of risks and uncertainties. And even those who were luckier, who still kept their jobs, was their life much easier? The answer is no. They had to witness their wages being brutally cut, potentially up to 60%. The money earned was already meager, and now it was worth even less due to the recession. Purchasing power decreased. Everything became more expensive relative to their ability to pay. As if the economic challenges weren't enough, life became much worse for residents living in the vast Great Plains region. This area had to endure another natural disaster that history calls the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl wasn't just strong winds. It was, quite literally, giant dust storms. These storms were the horrifying result of a combination of prolonged drought, strong winds, and misguided agricultural practices that had eroded the land over many years. These dust storms destroyed the land terribly. Fertile fields, once the source of life for hundreds of thousands of farming families, turned into dust deserts after the storms. Dust covered everything. The sky turned a frightening reddish-brown. The air was so thick it was impossible to breathe normally. Life there became unsustainable. What was the consequence? Hundreds of thousands of farming families were forced to abandon their homes, leaving everything they had, and embark on a directionless journey to seek a new life in the distant West. mainly California. They were often called Okies, although not all were from Oklahoma. Their stories of immense hardship and sacrifice were realistically portrayed in classic works like The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck and through the moving photographs of photographer Dorothea Lange, especially the image Migrant Mother. These works are powerful reminders of the extraordinary human spirit during that era. That's the overall picture of the context of the 1930s, a bleak picture of widespread poverty, unemployment, and compounding natural disasters. It sounds like it was just about difficulty and loss, doesn't it? But, precisely, within that grim, challenging picture, the sparks of resilience, perseverance, and especially human kindness shone brighter and more admirable than ever before. So, amidst that harsh backdrop, what was everyday life like at home? How did they cope with the difficulties? We will explore that now. Life at home, coping and saving. In the challenging context of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, the home, the family shelter, became the most important sanctuary, the last fortress where everyone could come together to weather the storm. Each family, each individual, had their own circumstances, their own story. But there were many surprisingly common points in how they coped, saved, and adapted to their new lives. And at the heart of that home was often a silent hero. Mother, the woman of the family, became the main pillar in managing the household. Their responsibility was heavier than ever before, having to run everything on an unprecedentedly tight budget. They had to calculate every tiny penny, had to make something out of nothing, had to invent new ways for every family member to still have enough to eat, clothes to wear, and warmth. The resourcefulness and capability of women during this period is an admirable story. Let's take a look at a typical week for a housewife in the 1930s. Monday was often laundry day. Although washing machines were starting to appear and save labor, they were still a luxury. For the vast majority of families, especially those facing hardship, hand washing on a washboard remained the common method. This job required a lot of strength, scrubbing each piece of clothing, rinsing multiple times. After washing, clothes were hung outdoors to dry. They maximized the use of sunlight and wind to dry clothes, both saving energy and making the clothes smell fresh. Next was Tuesday, often ironing day. Like washing machines, electric irons were on the market, but not every household could afford one. Many women still had to use heavy cast iron irons. You know, these irons weren't plugged in. They had to be heated on a coal or wood stove. Imagine lifting a heavy iron, moving it skillfully over clothes while ensuring it was hot enough to smooth out wrinkles, but not too hot to burn the fabric. That job required strength, carefulness, and experience. Just small tasks like washing and ironing show the hardship and skill of the women of that time. When money became so tight, things that were once very ordinary, very readily available, suddenly turned into luxuries people didn't dare dream of. Going to the barber or hairdresser became too expensive. People cut hair for each other, or chose the simplest hairstyles possible. Routine health care, which was not as common as today, was even more drastically cut back. Regular dental checkups? No money. Even seeing a doctor for a minor illness required deliberation. The health of the whole family now relied mainly on whoremember folk remedies, self-care, or simply enduring. Only when the illness was too severe, when it couldn't be endured any longer, did people seek medical help. Another thoughtful story about saving money is childbirth. Hospital childbirth costs could be very high. To save that money, some women chose to give birth at home. They sought the help of experienced midwives in the community, or simply family members who had knowledge about this. Home birth carried more risks, but in that circumstance, saving money became the top priority. Clothes and shoes. They were no longer something that could be casually bought new whenever an old one broke or went out of style. They had to be used to the fullest extent, patched carefully over and over again. They were patched until they couldn't be patched anymore, until they were completely ragged. Only then was replacement considered. Can you believe that in situations of extreme hardship, some families had to patch worn-out shoes by cutting pieces of rubber from old, unused tires? Imagine that, a rough piece of tire temporarily sewn onto the sole of a shoe. That wasn't just creativity, it was an expression of desperation and the effort to cling to life. Even families who had a relatively comfortable life before the Depression had to get used to new concepts. For example, having children wear hand-me-downs from older siblings. Clothes were passed down from one person to another in the family. Wearing hand-me-downs could make children feel uncomfortable, sometimes ashamed among friends. But during that era, personal pride had to step aside, giving way to the existence, the survival of the whole family. The most important thing was to have something to wear, not whether it was beautiful or fashionable. Facing harsh winters, heating the entire house was a huge expense that few families could afford. What was their solution? Instead of heating the whole house, families focused on heating only one room. Often it was the living room where there was a fireplace, or the kitchen where there was warmth from the stove. The whole family would gather together in that warm room, chatting, doing activities together to share warmth and also to save energy. They used various sources of fuel, anything that could burn to keep the fire going. It could be wood gathered from forests or ruins. It could be coal if they could afford it. Or sometimes, in the most desperate times, they had to even use dried corn cobs for heating. Think about that harshness, when precious fuel was so scarce that they had to use even the discarded parts of agricultural products. In an effort to save costs and especially to support each other, a notable trend emerged. Many families and relatives decided to live together. Several generations lived under one roof. This helped them share the burden of living expenses. Rent, electricity, water, and food were shared among multiple people. They also shared their meager resources. Those who had jobs shared their wages. Those without jobs took care of the house, children, or went out to find food or fuel. Living together not only helped alleviate financial burdens, but also strengthened family bonds, was a great source of encouragement during difficult days. The saving, the resourcefulness, the silent sacrifice of mothers and wives, and the effort of every family member during that time are undeniable living proof of the traditional values of hard work, self-reliance, and extraordinary coping ability of the American people. Even in the harshest circumstances, when everything seemed to be against them, they found every way to cope, to keep the family flame from going out, so that members still had a place to return to, someone to love and rely on. What do these stories remind you of? Perhaps your grandmother's ingenuity, your mother's hard work, or memories of the whole family gathering in one warm room in the winter? Please share with us in the comments below. Eating, hard times, meals, and creativity. If we talk about the biggest challenges in daily life in America in the 1930s, then the story of food is surely one of the most haunting. Food became scarce for many people. It was no longer a matter of eating well or poorly, but a matter of having enough to eat or not. Things we consider very familiar today, like fresh meat and vegetables, were often beyond the means of most families during that period. They were too expensive or simply unavailable. So, how could housewives prepare meals for their families when ingredients were both expensive and scarce? They had to learn how to stretch meals. Stretching meant using cheap, easily available ingredients to make meals more filling, enough for everyone, even if perhaps not fully nutritious. Cabbage soup became a symbol of Depression-era meals. It was called the national dish. Why cabbage soup? Because cabbage was a cheap, easy-to-grow vegetable that could be cooked into a large pot of soup for the whole family to eat. It helped fill empty stomachs. Besides cabbage soup, housewives maximized their creativity. They learned how to make casseroles or one-pot meals. These dishes were often simple, easy to make, utilizing beans, potatoes, pasta, and a little meat, if available, to create a filling meal. For example, chili, a stew from meat and beans, macaroni and cheese. These dishes were cheap, easy to make, and provided enough energy. Or chipped beef on toast, shredded dried beef, cooked in a creamy sauce, and poured over toast, was also a way to turn a small amount of meat into a dish for many people. Many people who lived through that time still vividly remember the taste of these simple dishes. That taste wasn't just food, it was the taste of effort, of love. To cope with food scarcity, growing vegetables in the home garden was no longer a hobby or pleasure. It became an extremely important job, a necessity to ensure the family had food. Every empty plot of land around the house could be utilized for planting. They planted easy-to-grow, quick-harvest vegetables to supplement daily meals. The lack of resources didn't just spur individual effort, but also spread a spirit of community. In some towns and cities, local governments or organizations converted unused vacant lots into community thrift gardens. The purpose was for people without land to still have a place to grow food. They worked together in the garden, shared experiences, and harvested the results together. The food supply from these community gardens helped many people. Sources indicate that in Detroit alone, this program once provided food for about 20,000 people. It is moving to witness scenes of people who might have been office workers before, still wearing old white shirts, now covered in mud, learning how to hoe, sow seeds, and cultivate to feed themselves and their families. That is an image of adaptation, of accepting the harsh reality and doing whatever was necessary to survive. When looking back at old cookbooks from this period, like my great-grandmother's, we can't help but be surprised by the creativity and ability to thoroughly utilize every available ingredient of the women from that time. They invented recipes that today we might find very strange or too simple. There were surprisingly simple recipes using only the most basic ingredients. For example, cookies made only from lard, sugar, and flour. No butter, eggs, or milk needed. Just 3 basic ingredients could create what could be called cookies, or the dish-buttered cucumber pickles. Sounds strange, right? But it was a unique way to prepare cucumbers and add flavor with vinegar and butter. And resourcefulness with ingredients was also evident in small details. For example, pie crusts made from finely ground cornflakes. Instead of using entirely wheat flour or more expensive flours, they ground available cornflakes to make pie crusts. That was a very ingenious way not to waste anything. Recipes using common fruits like Washington apples also show creativity. They transformed apples into many different dishes, from warm baked goods to refreshing salads, so that daily meals wouldn't be too monotonous or boring. But perhaps the most haunting thing, the thing that showed the extreme hardship of this era most clearly and heartbreakingly, was the story of families forced to eat in shifts. Try to imagine, to ensure everyone had food, but with such a limited amount of food, they had to share. Some family members would eat on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, while others, perhaps siblings, would eat on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. And maybe, if they were lucky enough to have a little more food, the whole family would eat together for one meal on Sunday. What does that mean? It means there were days when you had to sit and watch your dearest loved ones, siblings, parents, children, go hungry while you got to eat, or vice versa. That anguish, pity, and helplessness must have been incredibly difficult emotionally. This story is a powerful reminder of the severity of the Great Depression. However, even in the most difficult, darkest times, the spirit of community was the flame that warmed people's hearts. Shared meals, often called potlucks, became very common. They were often organized by churches, charities, or simply neighbors. Each family, contributing whatever little food they had, brought it together to share with everyone. Potlucks weren't just a way for people to have a more filling meal, they were also an inexpensive form of entertainment, an opportunity for people to meet, chat, and encourage each other. These shared meals brought people closer together, reinforcing solidarity and neighborly affection. Thus, the story of food in the 1930s wasn't just about scarcity. It was also about extraordinary creativity, silent sacrifice, and the power of community when facing adversity together. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. Entertainment and spirit, light in the dark. When life revolved solely around how to have enough to eat, clothes to wear, and a place to live, entertainment suddenly became something too distant, too luxurious. When money was that tight, people had to cut non-essential expenses first, and entertainment was certainly one of the first things to be cut. Going to the movies at the cinema, once a very popular pastime for all classes in the years before the Depression, now became a luxury that most people could no longer afford. The consequence of this was clear. Over a third of movie theaters across the United States were forced to close due to lack of audiences. Imagine the scene of movie theaters that were once lit up, crowded, now silent, and permanently closed. That is a symbol of loss in cultural life. But humans always have an extraordinary ability, the ability to find joy, to find light, even in the darkness. When they couldn't go to the movies, they turned to another form of entertainment, much more popular, much more accessible. That was the radio. The old radio, with its sometimes crackly, sometimes clear sound, became the centerpiece of many homes in the 1930s. It was the main source of entertainment, running continuously throughout the day, from early morning until late at night. The radio didn't just bring information, it brought the outside world, brought stories, songs, and most importantly, brought connection and joy. During the day, the radio was for housewives. They listened to soap operas, stories about love, family, drama, captivating and engaging, helping them forget some of the worries and hardships of daily life. After school, the radio served children. There were dramatic action and adventure programs specifically for young listeners. Children sat and listened, imagining exciting scenes, transforming into their favorite characters. And perhaps the most sacred moment of the day was the evening. That was when the whole family gathered around the radio, listening together to a broadcast. It could be the news update. It could be a comedy show to laugh heartily together, or a lively live musical performance. The moment when the whole family sat together, sharing a single entertainment experience, created strong bonds, a beautiful memory amidst the chaos and difficulty. If not listening to the radio, families could choose other forms of home entertainment. Playing board games became very popular in the 1930s. Board games were an inexpensive form of entertainment, could be played over and over, and, importantly, required the participation of multiple people. They encouraged interaction, friendly competition, and laughter within the family. One of the famous board games born during this period was the game Sorry. Launched in 1934, Sorry quickly became loved by many families because of its simple but surprising rules. But speaking of the most successful during the Great Depression, we must mention the game Monopoly. The interesting and slightly ironic thing is that this game appeared precisely during the most difficult years, when money was the scarcest thing. Yet, Monopoly allowed players to freely buy and sell, build property, own hotels and famous streets, with huge amounts of money. That money, that wealth, perhaps was something they could only dream of having in real life. Perhaps Monopoly was a way for people to temporarily escape the harsh reality, to live in a virtual world where they were rich and successful. It must have been so. Besides home entertainment, there were also public forms of entertainment that were affordable. Mini golf became a real craze in the 1930s. over 30,000 mini-golf courses sprang up across the country. The cost per game was only 25 to 50 cents. This was a very affordable cost, allowing many working people to participate. Mini-golf offered a little challenge, a little competition, and importantly, a chance to get outside, breathe fresh air, and have a few hours of fun. No matter how hard life was, no matter how heavy the burden of making a living, people always found ways to entertain themselves. Entertainment to temporarily forget worries, to find small smiles. And most importantly, these forms of entertainment, whether sitting by the radio or playing board games, were opportunities to gather with family, share happy moments together. It helped strengthen bonds between members, was invaluable spiritual encouragement. This once again proves the resilience, the ability to find joy, to find light, even in the darkest adversity of the American people at that time. They did not let difficulties completely crush their spirit. They found ways to keep the flame of hope from being extinguished. What movie or radio program from your grandparents' time do you still remember? Is there an old toy that just mentioning its name makes you smile? Let's look back together. Community cooperation and government support. The Great Depression was not just a personal challenge for each family. With its scale and destructiveness, it was truly a challenge for the entire society. And precisely in these most difficult moments, the spirit of community, mutual support, was strongly promoted. People realized that no one could overcome this storm alone, and the only way to survive and rebuild was to help each other. In neighborhoods and cities, community and charitable organizations were quickly established or expanded their activities. Their main purpose was to provide support and help to the most disadvantaged, the unemployed with no income, the homeless with no shelter. Familiar images from that period are long lines of people silently queuing for charity soup. They are the warm community kitchens where people could come for a hot meal, free of charge. These were practical, humane actions, showing sharing and love between people. However, the scale of the crisis was too large. The resources of private charities, or even local governments, were insufficient to cope. Millions of people needed help, and only a larger force could make a significant difference. Therefore, the federal government, meaning the central government, began to intervene. Under the leadership of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a series of programs and policies were enacted. Collectively, they were called the New Deal. The New Deal was a significant historical turning point for the United States. It not only aimed to solve the immediate crisis, but also marked the birth of the American welfare state. The concept of a government responsible for providing a basic social safety net for its citizens was relatively new at that time. The New Deal implemented many specific programs to support the people. For example, it provided unemployment insurance to help those who lost their jobs have a small amount of money to live on while searching for new work. It provided support for dependent children, orphaned children, or those whose parents were unable to care for them. And later, a very important part of the New Deal was large-scale job creation programs. The government invested in public works such as building roads, bridges, schools, parks. These projects not only improved national infrastructure, but more importantly created millions of jobs for the unemployed, helping them earn income, regain self-respect, and contribute to society. Before the Great Depression, receiving government aid was often viewed with stigma. It was considered shameful, a sign of failure or laziness. Americans highly valued self-reliance and self-sufficiency. However, in the context of the Depression, when millions of people, including those from the middle class, hard-working people, suddenly lost everything, facing poverty and unemployment, this attitude towards receiving government assistance began to change. Having to rely on government support was no longer so shameful because it was the shared fate of so many people. Nevertheless, for many, especially those who had been independent, Receiving aid was still an emotionally difficult experience. It affected their self-respect, but they understood that it was the only way to get through this extremely difficult period. The stories of migrants from the Dust Bowl, the Okies, were truthfully and hauntingly portrayed by literature and photography. The novel The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck detailed their extreme, arduous life as they left their homeland, their journey to the West, and the difficulties in seeking a new life. The iconic photographs of photographer Dorothea Lange, especially Migrant Mother, powerfully captured the suffering, resilience, and hope of these people. These works of art are not just history, but deep reminders of the great sacrifice and extraordinary spirit of humanity during that era. Community cooperation and government intervention, though sometimes hesitant and imperfect, played an extremely important role in helping the United States and its people overcome the darkest period of the Great Depression. It showed that when faced with challenges too large, unity, sharing, and support from a safety net are absolutely essential. What if you could see America change before your eyes, one photo at a time? In this video, we're diving into 100 powerful then and now photos of America, each one packed with history, memory, and change. Get ready for a nostalgic ride you won't forget. Welch, West Virginia downtown, once a thriving hub shaped by coal and courage, grew brick by brick along the Appalachian Hills. Its changing streets, frozen in photographs, trace the rise and resilience of a town built on grit and hope. Homowack Lodge, Borscht Belt, New York once rang with the clatter of bowling balls and summer laughter among its Hasidic guests. Now, its empty corridors echo a forgotten era, closed long ago as safety concerns rusted its pride away. The 1967 postcard from the Poconos captures golden days of sunbathing and trail rides, where laughter once echoed through the trees. Only fading traces remain of summers filled with sunlight and untroubled joy. 1947, Chevrolet and Diner. Two teens once leaned on that hood, sharing milkshakes and laughter beneath neon lights. 63 years later, the car and the corner still whisper stories of simpler times and generations bound by memory. Poconos Dining Hall, once filled with clinking dishes and laughter, now lies hushed beneath moss-covered carpets. The vibrant reds and oranges fade gently into memory, echoing a past no longer heard. Matt's Family Homestead, Wisconsin, 1907 to September 2024, stood tall among fields, filled with generations of laughter and labor. Now erased from the landscape, its loss leaves a hollow space where roots once ran deep. Grossinger's indoor pool, unveiled in 1958 with Elizabeth Taylor among its first guests, once shimmered with opulence and light. Now, its cracked tiles and silent halls echo the grandeur that time could not preserve. Central Park, New York City, during the Great Depression, once a place of leisure, it turned into a refuge of desperation. By the early 1930s, makeshift shanties lined its edges, built by families clinging to hope amid overwhelming loss. Rhyolite, Nevada rose with the promise of gold, only to fall silent after the 1907 crash. Its crumbling ruins now whisper stories to those brave enough to wander its wind-blown streets. The Pines, Fallsburg, New York, 1950s to recent times, once buzzed with music, laughter, and summer joy. Today, its hollow halls and decaying walls preserve only fragments of the memories that once filled the air. From 1911 to 1938, Kennecott mines in Alaska churned out copper worth $200 million, powering an industrial age. Today, its ghostly ruins are slowly being revived, echoing the spirit of those who once called it home. Lackawanna Railroad, Sussex Branch, New Jersey, 1911 to 2021, once thundered with steam and steel. Today, trails weave through the woods where trains once ran, offering a path shaped by history rather than commerce. The Hollywood sign, first raised in 1923, as Hollywoodland, once sold dreams through real estate letters. By 1949, the land vanished, but the sign endured, reborn in 1978 as a lasting symbol of stardom and reinvention. The Pines Hotel in South Fallsburg, New York, once shimmered with the laughter of vacationers seeking escape in the Borscht Belt, but as airplanes took flight, the hotel fell silent, fading into a haunting shadow of lost glamour. Pennsylvania Avenue and the Capitol, Washington, D.C., 1860, lined with muddy tracks and horse-drawn hopes, it framed a rising nation. As the cast-iron dome took shape, so did America's restless spirit, bold, unyielding, and still in the making. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia opened in 1829 with echoes of reform, but its harsh walls later confined legends like Al Capone. Closed in 1971, it now stands silent, a haunting museum of justice and forgotten souls. Which photo in this video brought back the strongest memory for you? Please share your thoughts in the comments. West Main Street, Kent, Ohio, before 1910, was a stretch of handcrafted storefronts lit by gaslight and full of charm. Over the decades, those corners evolved with the nation, their changes etched into every brick and beam. The Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio looms as a silent guardian of dark tales, its stone walls whispering echoes of inmates' footsteps. Visitors and ghost hunters tread its shadowed corridors, drawn by the prison's chilling legacy and haunting atmosphere. Chicago Water Tower, 1871, a lone survivor in a city turned to ash. Still standing today, it honors the grit of a reborn Chicago and the dawn of a skyline that rose from smoke and sorrow. City Hall Subway Station, opened in 1904 beneath the bustling heart of New York City, was Rafael Guastavino's architectural masterpiece, its elegant arches whispering history. Though closed since 1945, the station's silent grandeur endures, revealed only to fortunate visitors on special tours. Beaufort and Darby Avenues, Porter Ranch, Los Angeles. In 1982, it was where bikes lifted off into movie magic. Today, those same streets preserve the spirit of E.T., etched into curbs that once launched a cinematic legend. The Sahara Lounge, Utica Avenue, Brooklyn, 1961. Once alive with danger and drama, its faded facade remains, holding the echoes of a mob tale that Hollywood etched into legend. Harvey Milk's Castro Camera Shop, from its humble 1975 storefront to its 2024 presence, still holds the spirit of a movement, where snapshots once developed alongside dreams for equality and change. Manhattan Bridge, 1908 to 2021. What began as steel suspended over dreams now anchors generations. From its skeletal rise to its modern grace, this landmark threads together past ambition and present-day resilience. San Francisco, 1920 to 2020, where hills once framed scattered homes, towers, and transit now shape the skyline. A century of transformation has reshaped coastal charm into a bold and ever-changing urban mosaic. Studio 54, New York City, 1980 to 2024, where glitter once fell like confetti on legends of the night, now stands reimagined, echoing whispers of its glamorous, untamed past through modern walls that remember every beat. At Arlington House in the 1860s, Federal General Heintzelman stood where Robert E. Lee once called home, two histories clashing beneath one roof, now preserved as a solemn witness to America's divided past. Myersdale, Pennsylvania, once echoed with the whistle of the Western Maryland Railroad in the early 1900s. By 2021, its weathered station remains, a proud relic of an age powered by steam and the pulse of progress. 2,445 State Road, from sweet glaze to spinning wheels, this 1959 Krispy Kreme now pedals forward as a bike shop. Decades later, its long-hidden windows once again let in the light of change and memory. 21 Pearl Street, New York City, 1890s to 2024. Once lined with gas lamps and horse-drawn carts, this corner now pulses with glass towers and city noise, echoing the vibrant evolution of Manhattan's ever-changing heart. Old Town Center, Chester, Massachusetts, 1892 to 2024. Weathered bricks and wooden trims recall a bygone rhythm, while today's pace winds itself around the town's enduring core, blending history with the life that carries on. From the same bench, the New York City skyline in 1957 revealed a modest horizon. By 2021, steel giants dominated the view. Each towering line marks a chapter of ambition, transformation, and the ever-climbing pulse of the city. Las Vegas, 1925. Just dust, tracks, and cattle beneath a blazing desert sun. When the Hoover Dam began in 1931, the frontier stirred with ambition, planting the seeds of a neon empire destined to dazzle the world. Joyland Amusement Park in Wichita opened in 1949, thrilling generations with its legendary wooden coaster. After a tragic accident in 2004 led to its closure by 2006, its silent rides now stand as poignant reminders of laughter and loss. San Francisco LGBTQ Center, 1979 to 2024. Born from courage and built on community, it stood as a lifeline in times of struggle. Today, it remains a proud beacon of identity, resilience, and the fight for dignity and love. Goldfield Hotel, Goldfield, Nevada, once a beacon of desert luxury, now stands weathered and whispering. Its empty halls echo with stories of prosperity, decline, and the ghostly footsteps of time refusing to be forgotten. Did any of these places remind you of where you grew up? We'd love to hear your story. Deadwood, South Dakota Main Street, 1860s to 2022, once roared with saloons, spurs, and gold dust in the air. Now, its wooden facades stand still, preserving the echoes of a wild frontier that time refused to tame. Grossinger's Resort in the Catskills once dazzled with elegance and laughter, drawing stars like Jerry Lewis. Since its 1986 closure, moss creeps over once glamorous gazebos, nature reclaiming what high society left behind. San Francisco before the Golden Gate Bridge, 1868, when the vast strait shimmered untouched and the view from Telegraph Hill stretched wide and wild. Decades later, steel would span that silence, with a symbol known worldwide. Boblo Island, Ontario, where laughter once rang from a zoo, Ferris wheel, and dance hall since 1898. Though it closed in 1993, the island's past now fades beneath new developments built over long-lost delight. Mount Rushmore, 1930s. Dust and dynamite carved the beginning of a nation's tribute into solid granite. As George Washington's likeness emerged, so too did an enduring symbol of ambition, identity, and the hands that shaped both. Letchworth Village, Thiels, New York, once echoing with troubled voices and whispered secrets, now stands in haunting silence. Its crumbling halls bear witness to a past marked by sorrow, shadows, and the forgotten lives within. Cleveland, Ohio's Playhouse Square in 1928, shimmered with marquees and velvet-lined dreams. Nearly a century later, its glow returns, restored and alive, bridging the glamour of yesterday with the pulse of today's city streets. Houston Astrodome, Houston, Texas, opened in 1965 with awe and ambition, hailed as the eighth wonder of the world. Today, its echoing halls speak not of crowds, but of resilience, now sheltering those in need. Route 44 and Route 18, Rootstown Center, Ohio, in 1947, was just a crossing where farmers waved from pickups. By 2023, pavement widened and traffic thickened, but that old town heart still beats beneath the asphalt. Miracle Strip Park in Florida, once alive with laughter and the thrill of the Starliner coaster since 1963, saw its final ride in 2004. Now replaced by condos, its echoes live on in sunlit memories of summer joy. 476, Broadway, New York, 1870-2023, remains anchored in place amid a skyline that never stops shifting. Its ornate facade, born of another era, speaks to a city that honors its past, even as it reinvents itself. Grossinger's pool amenities in Catskills, New York, once dazzled with heated tiles and chandeliers that shimmered above elegant gatherings. Today, its faded grandeur lingers, echoing a time when luxury defined every detail of resort life. Store and residence of W. Kimmel, Rootstown, Ohio, circa 1908, where commerce met family under one roof, and neighbors gathered more for company than goods. In that modest frame stood the pulse of a town, stitched together by shared routine. Summers in the Poconos once shimmered with joy, cabins filled, kids splashed, laughter carried on the breeze. Today, fading paint and silence whisper stories only the trees still remember. Miami Beach, from the early 1900s to the mid-20th century, bloomed from windswept sandbar to coastal jewel. What was once untouched shoreline became a shining symbol of ambition, luxury, and sun-soaked American dreams. 70s Poconos architecture once dazzled with futuristic flair, sweeping lounges and sculpted lobbies built to impress. Though time has weathered its edges, the silhouette still stands like a memory, frozen in bold ambition. Erie Canal, Lockport, New York, 1890 to 2021, once buzzed with barges and trade, driving growth through the heart of a young America. Today, its calm surface mirrors the legacy of those who shaped history with shovels and resolve. Congress Avenue, Austin, Texas, 1901, a street where progress marched proudly toward the Capitol, yet horses still clattered on cobblestone. It's a place where old-world charm brushed against the edge of modern ambition. Boston's Big Dig, an urban gamble decades in the making, tore up streets and tunneled dreams beneath the city. After 20 years of noise, dust, and debate, it reshaped Boston's heart from concrete chaos into something closer to calm. Manhattan's elevated trains, 1920s to 1980s, once roared above the streets, hauling freight and dreams through the skyline. Today, the High Line thrives with greenery and walkers, transforming steel and motion into a garden path above the city. Central Park skating, 1890, to laced boots carved across frozen lakes as laughter echoed beneath the Dakota apartments. Built in 1858, the park gave New Yorkers a rare moment of peace in the rhythm of an ever-moving city. Historic Road, 1860 to 1930s. Once carved by wagon wheels and weary boots, this path bore the hopes of pioneers. Through dust and distance, it connected frontier lives, leaving behind echoes of perseverance etched in earth and time. Love time traveling through old photos like these? Hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what we uncover next. McConkey's Ferry Inn, Taylorsville, Pennsylvania, early 1900s to 2022, remains by the trail, its stone walls marked by generations of passage. Once a haven for travelers, it now greets hikers with traces of a slower, humbler era. Bathgate Avenue, Bronx, 1936, alive with street vendors, shouting kids, and the clatter of pushcarts during the Great Depression. Through hardship, the Bronx pulsed with grit and spirit, each corner echoing with stories of survival and strength. Broad Boulevard steamer car, early 1900s, when steam hissed and wheels turned like clockwork on polished rails. Though the road remains, that elegant marvel endures now only through worn photographs and stories passed down. Have you ever explored an abandoned place like the ones shown in this video? What did it feel like? Main Street US 40, Scenery Hill, Pennsylvania, lined with porches, diners, and stories since early days. Though time has brought new pavement and passing cars, its heart still beats with the warmth of a town that remembers. Los Angeles, California, then and now, tells a story written in skyline shifts and sunlit sprawl. What began as dusty promise has grown into a city of dreams, layered with decades of reinvention, ambition, and unstoppable change. Lead and Dines Building, Tempe, Arizona, from the late 1900s to now, still holds its place among glass and steel. Time has dressed the street in new skin, but this brick landmark keeps the town's early heartbeat alive. Synagogue turned Buddhist temple, 1986 to present, once filled with Hebrew prayers, now resonates with Buddhist chants. This sacred space, shaped by decades of devotion, carries the layered voices of two enduring spiritual paths. 80 and 86, Monroe Falls Avenue, Monroe Falls, Ohio. Built in the early 1900s, these homes once rang with front porch chatter. Today, they remain rooted in place, bearing the marks of decades in small-town American life. Union Soldiers at Price, Birch and Company, Alexandria, Virginia, once a house of unspeakable suffering, marked by chains and silence. In 1860s stillness, soldiers stood where lives were sold. Today, a plaque whispers the truth too long buried. Building Fire, New Bedford, Massachusetts, 1965. An ordinary day turned to ash as flames devoured brick and memory. Smoke curled through the streets, leaving behind a blackened shell and silence where stories once lived. 100th Meridian, Cozad, Nebraska, 1866 to today, once marked the edge where rail met wild frontier. A silent sentinel now, it stands not just for tracks laid, but for the restless spirit that pushed America ever westward. Georgeville Road and Sullivan Avenue, 1950s to 2022, once a spot where kids raced bikes and neighbors waved from porches. Now, the traffic lights blink where laughter once echoed, but the corner still carries that small-town grin. JFK's Boston apartment in 1959 stood modest and unassuming, yet within those walls lived a man destined to shape history. Today, in 2024, the building endures, quietly honoring the legacy of a leader who once called it home. Abraham Lincoln Statue Installation, Washington, D.C., 1920. Stone and vision merged as artisans carved more than a likeness. The nation gathered, witnessing its principles rise in marble, a tribute to endurance, unity, and unshakable purpose. Unlucky House, San Francisco, 1936 to 2022. Same spot, same curse. Decades roll by, but somehow Cars still treat that poor house like it owes them money. Car crash, Brooklyn, 1941. Steel met steel on a street where horns and hurried lives clashed daily. It's a frozen moment from a grittier era, when city blocks bustled and traffic laws were more like friendly suggestions. Vandenboom Chair Factory, Quincy, Illinois, 1880 to 2018, stood as a backbone of craft in an age of steam and sweat. Its worn brick and timber whispered of calloused hands, handmade pride, and a time when factories shaped towns. Hoover Dam water level, July 1983 to December 2022, once brimming with promise, now etched with the marks of time and drought. The receding shoreline tells a story of climate, change, and what we've taken for granted. Charleston, South Carolina, 1865, reduced to ruins after Sherman's shelling, its streets filled with rubble and grief. Yet St. Michael's Church, built in 1761, endured the flames as a lasting emblem of faith beyond destruction. Daniel Plainview's house, Los Angeles, 1900s to today, once fueled by oil wealth and steeped in solitude, its walls carried the weight of empire. Now a fading relic, it marks the cost of an era shaped by relentless ambition. Hibernian Hall, Charleston, South Carolina, once a vibrant hub before the Civil War, endured the harsh marks of Union shelling. Today, its aged columns remain upright, carrying the weight of fellowship, flame, and unshaken resilience. Ada, Ohio, 1938 to today, where time glides gently through maple-lined streets and front porches, whisper stories. Though modern frames fill the view, the soul of this town still glows with the elegance of simpler, slower days. Rootstown Township School, Ohio, 1917 to 2015, rose with timber and chalk, where generations traced lessons on slate and dreams in notebooks. Though walls expanded and hallways changed, its spirit still carries the echo of childhood mornings past. Lincoln Conspirators House, Washington, D.C., 1865 to now. Inside these historic walls, a plot once unfolded that shook a nation, its legacy etched deep into the story of America's most turbulent hour. Hamilton, Montana, captured in 1942 and revisited in 2018, stands as a lasting symbol of small-town endurance. Weathered storefronts and changing skylines echo generations of grit, growth, and unwavering spirit. Central Avenue and Adams Street in Phoenix, Arizona, 1920s to 2024, once buzzed with Model T engines and desert grit. Today, glass towers and traffic hum, where a young city first carved its name into the sun-baked landscape. Honolulu, Hawaii in the late 19th century, its shores transformed into a vibrant crossroads of commerce and belief. Under swaying palms, sandalwood and sugar drew ships and strangers into a place forever altered by ambition and exchange. J. Uplinger, groceries, and the Stoneman Row Barber Shop in Monroe Falls, Ohio, offered more than goods and trims. They were the heartbeat of a simpler time. Around the 1900s, these storefronts stitched daily life into the fabric of a close-knit town. Speck Bakery's horseback delivery in 1932 brought fresh cookies and cupcakes straight to your doorstep, an old-world charm where flour-dusted saddlebags and hoofbeats replaced digital pings and delivery apps. Early Los Angeles skyline, once a low sprawl, stood modest beside the steel and glass towers of 2001. Each new rise marks a chapter of ambition, shaping the city skyward with every generation's bold pursuit. Miami Erie Canal in St. Mary's, Ohio, 1949 to today, once carried the steady rhythm of canal boats and local trade. Though reshaped by time, it continues to reflect the legacy of a route that fueled the heartland's growth. Great Frederick Fair, Frederick, Maryland, 1949 to 2023, where laughter, livestock, and lemonade have woven a timeless tapestry. Each passing decade adds another thread to this cherished celebration of community and heritage. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps others find our channel. Got suggestions or ideas for what we could do better? We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.